episode of the Daily Objective, brought to you by the Ayn Rand Center UK. Today, I have one of my favorite co-hosts, James Valliant. You all know this, but I say it every time just because I feel like it. And Jack Schumann, one of my favorite people on the planet as well. And we are going to be discussing something that was discussed, I believe, a week or so ago on one of the Daily Objectives with Paul Gay, about the Cain Velasquez case. Any of you who do not know Cain Velasquez, he was at one time the UFC heavyweight champion of the world, or two-time heavyweight champion of the world. He is a monster, a prolific wrestler, a prolific fighter, a very feared man, all-around tough guy, someone I wouldn't want to mess with in a million years. Well, it turns out that he discovered that his son had been sexually molested by somebody at a daycare center, not once, not twice, but hundreds of times. Apparently, and I could be in error here, and my two co-hosts will correct me on any errors I make, this went through some sort of legal process, and the person was either cleared or the charges were dropped. And this, of course, made Cain pretty upset. So he decided to take the law into his own hands. I believe there was a firearm involved. I believe he shot it. This person and his family in their car ended up wounding the father, and was brought up on charges himself for, of course, I believe, attempted murder. But we'll get into the particulars of it, and if I've made any errors, we can correct those along the way. I mean, I think the Jax will know all the particulars of the case, and the go-to guy for all the legal issues and illegal moral issues will be James, since he was a former prosecutor. So whomever wants to lead this off with anything that I missed, go ahead, start.
I will. I'll just fill in a few more blanks if you don't mind.
Sure.
So if you guys listened to the show last week, I actually know Cain a bit. I trained at the same gym as him, and I think kind of the most fascinating thing about this case to me is that the way that Cain reacted was so not Cain. It was like he's like the gentle giant, like the nicest guy you will ever meet, a complete family man. Everybody in the gym looked up to him. He was a mentor. He teaches kids. Amazing guy. So one thing to kind of clear up, Mark, the guy that was suspected of molesting, I call it sexual assault. I guess it's probably both, but the guy that was charged with molesting, there was enough evidence they interviewed Cain's son, Cain Jr., and there was enough evidence from that interview to determine that sexual assault and molestation had happened. It was enough for the police to arrest him. It was enough for him to be put in jail.
Well, wait, evidence as in the kid's testimony, but not necessarily physical evidence. They didn't do any swab or rape kit tests or anything like that.
I'm unsure about that. All I know is that it was enough evidence for the police to arrest them, which is definitely not enough to, convict him in a court of law with, 99% certainty. But it was still enough for them to arrest him. And as I understand, it wasn't just him that it happened to. It was other children at the school as well. So then what happened was the guy's name is, the suspect's name is Harry Goularte. That's all over the news. He lives at the daycare center that his mother runs, which is where Cain Jr. was. As well, the stepfather is also part of that whole business. So then the guy gets arrested, goes to jail, has his bail hearing. His bail is set at 50 grand, which is kind of nothing. There's bail bonds, it's effectively free. He gets out. The only protective order that is put in place is he's supposed to stay 300 yards away from Cain Jr. He can go back to the daycare center. He can go back and work there and hang out there or whatever, but he has to stay 300 yards away from the boy that he's suspected of molesting. He's supposed to wear an ankle bracelet. On the day that he goes to pick up the ankle bracelet, I believe he's in the car with his stepfather. Either the mom is there or like a sister or somebody else. And Cain somehow finds out about it. Now, how he finds out about it and what he chose to do with that information is something that will come out in the trial, and it's something to discuss, because the defense attorney is basically saying how he found out is significant to how he reacted.
and of enormous legal significance.
Yeah. So, and that is, so the implication is that he was completely, like, he suddenly found out about it and like kind of went into sort of madness or whatever, gets in his truck, gets in his F-250 truck, proceeds to chase down Goularte in the truck with his, in another truck with his father for 11 miles. And this is on 280, I think, on the 280 freeway. Chases him down and through town and stuff for 11 miles, rams into him, and shoots while he's driving in a car. And we all know, Mark, that really works, right? You can easily.
It works in Hollywood.
I was telling Paul last week, it only works if you're John Wick, but because he can do it on horseback too. But
shot up the car. He ended up not hitting Harry Goularte, but Harry Goularte's stepdad in the shoulder.
Correct. Yes. So he did it. And so now, after the car chase is over and whatnot, Cain doesn't flee from the police. He basically stops. He's completely cooperative. He lets them take into custody he lets them take him into custody with no fuss, no resisting arrest. And from there, sort of the story proceeds. And then Cain is in jail for 8 months. His bail keeps getting denied by the same judge. This is the other thing, though. The same judge that denied Cain's bail 3 times is the same judge that let the suspect out.
Granted bail on the other guy.
Right. Granted bail on the other guy.
God, this is getting disgusting.
And after 8 months, the judge changes her mind and sets million.
No, they get a new judge. They
get a new judge.
Yep, they get a new judge, and that new judge heard the case for bail and let him out immediately.
Got it. Okay, this is a very, very interesting fact pattern, is it not?
What's hitting me right off the bat, I don't know. I don't have to lead this session, James. This is all in your court because you know what's going on and we don't. What in the heck is wrong with a judge who sets a bail so low? I mean, $50,000 means the person has to put up what, $5,000 essentially in a bail with the rest. That's very little for a person who is an imminent threat to children. Imminent threat.
Yes, and that's what the judge has to consider. In California, a judge in determining bail or release of a person who's been charged with a felony, they have to consider 2 things. Their risk of flight. Are they a flight risk? Will they come back to court? Will they flee the country? Do they have foreign contacts? Do the person own property here, have children here, which will more likely anchor them here? That's one consideration. Other is the danger to the community. And the higher the danger level of the felony, obviously, child molest, continuous child molest, which is what he's being charged with here, is a very serious offense. And although he had no record, from what I understand, Jax, please correct me if I get any of these facts wrong.
No, I couldn't find any prior on him.
Yeah, and I think in the records they actually admit he doesn't have any prior, at least history of convictions. But this isn't uncommon in child molest cases. Child molesters basically do one kind of crime. They're not like gang members who will steal cars, shoot up, do drugs, have a whole laundry list. Child molesters are very, very focused on their crimes. So it's not uncommon for them not to have a record. But he's working with children. Now, you would have thought, now this is what really gets to me. If you're going to release the guy because he has no record, and so far it's just one child who's the victim, okay, we'll set bail, but I don't want you getting anywhere near children. Why on earth was he allowed to go back to a daycare center which there were small children? That blows my head. It really does. The judge should have had much stricter requirements. Even if you make bail, dude, you are to stay 1,000 yards away from any school, daycare facility, indeed any minor child under 14. Should have been at least while we're pending determining his guilt or innocence, that should have been the conditional.
even if that sets some form of hardship on him, like he has to move out of the place that he's living in, which is above a daycare center with these children.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. Find another job, go on unemployment, do something else, my friend. You are not going to be around children while a felony case of child abuse is pending against you. That seems to me, in my view, to have been a serious judgment error on the part of that first judge.
And
let
then
me ask a question real quick. Sorry, Mark. Is when somebody gets out on when this guy gets out on bail, is there any obligation on the prosecution side to inform the people that levied the complaint? So was there any obligation for Cain himself to be informed, Cain and his wife, Michelle, to be informed that, okay, this guy that we just locked up a couple of days ago has now gotten out on bail?
I know of no legal requirement compelling prosecutors, but I can tell you, I was a public prosecutor in California for almost 18 years, and I always let my victims know, I always let my important witnesses know the release status of the person in question. If they've committed some act of violence, if they've committed some horrible act, you want to let the victim know, okay, this guy's made bail, there are certain restrictions. If you see him anywhere near you, you call the cops. This is the number you call. Do not, do not collect $200. You call the cops if you see him even across the street for your own safety. So while there probably should be, one of the interesting laws that California and most states do have now is this mandatory reporting law. If you run a daycare center, if you are a teacher, if you are a child care provider, if you're a medical professional, a nurse, a doctor, and you have reason to believe that a child is being abused or molested, either physically abused or sexually molested, you are required under law to report that to law enforcement. The other thing here is that a lot of the facts of the case of the molest, we're not going to know, because another aspect of the law is that when a minor is involved, they will hide everything to protect the minor and to protect the minor's privacy and dignity and so forth. All of this information has to come out in court. And that's probably where we're going to learn about a lot of this for the first time. So in order to evaluate Mr. Velasquez's, even the sympathy, the moral sympathy level that we would have for him, we would need to know what he knew, how he found out about this, assuming his child even was molested. You see, one of the parts about the discussion you and Paul had last week, you guys hit a lot of the major points that I agree with. But one thing I would do from the outset is radically distinguish self-defense and defense of others from vigilantism. If you are seeing something, if you are in the act of seeing the crime itself, you have every right to use whatever force is reasonably necessary to stop that from happening. If you come upon an armed robbery, someone's put a gun in someone's face in an alley, give me all your money. You have every right to pull out your own gun.
That's not vigilantism, right?
That's self-defense and defense of others. We do not surrender, even with a government. We're not anarchists, but even with a government and a good government, we never surrender our immediate right to self-defense or defense of others. So if you catch a assault with a deadly weapon, an attempted murder, a rape, a child molest, something like that going on, you have a right to use even deadly force, because those are deadly threats, to stop that crime, prevent it from happening, and even use a large degree of force in preventing that person from escaping. And I would distinguish the catching them in the act situation from learning about it after the fact. If someone comes to you and says, well, yesterday this happened to me, or last week this happened to me, or over the course of this whole year, it happened to me 100 times, which is more like this case. It's an after the fact report. And an after the fact report is something that is best investigated by the police. And
so in this case, what's interesting to me about it is that when Cain and his wife found out about their son, Cain didn't get in the car and try and go shoot this guy, right? They did the right thing in the beginning. They told the police about it, right? They went the appropriate route. They called the police intervened. Justice is working so far. Right. They take the man, they interview him, they interview the child, they take the man, they interview the man as well. They interview Harry Gulak. Based on both interviews, they arrest him. Then he gets out, and that's when Cain goes bonkers.
Well, one thing you can't know is what Mr. Goularte said. It would be improper for a prosecutor to let you know if there was a confession or admission. So we
Correct.
probably won't know anything about what Mr. Goularte told the police until it comes out in court. The other thing is that Mr. Goularte is still charged. Charges are still pending. So they did the right thing, it's true, by going to the cops and having the kid be interviewed. And believe me, I've been behind that two-way glass watching the social worker or the psychologist interview the small child behind the two-way glass. And that in itself has to be recorded, because between the ages of 4 and 7, there's a certain category of children that have a hard time distinguishing fantasy from reality. And those kids, for example, who have nightmares and night terrors, they say 5, 6-year-olds, 4-year-olds are the ones who believe in monsters under the bed and are having a hard time distinguishing that. And children are very influenceable. You can influence a child to say, they'll say what they want the adult, what'll please the adult. And so very frequently, even a child's report can be, I have seen daycare centers, preschools accused in effect of the same kind of thing. And it turned out that it was poor investigation. It was people putting the idea into these kids' heads. So
the McMartin School incident.
Those cases spring to mind, don't they? And or there was the Akiki case here in San Diego, for example, another similar case like that. So when it is a report, no, look, if my wife came to me and said, I was raped, I would, 1, believe her because I trust my wife. 2, my first thought would be to go out and beat the living crap out of this guy, okay?
Right.
And it would be every impulse in my body would be screaming at me to do something. But I would take a deep breath. And I would say, we're going to report this to the police, and we're going to let the legal system handle this insofar as it can. That would have to be, since it's an after the fact report, since I didn't catch it in the act, I would have to handle all those emotions, try and set them aside as much as one could understand and sympathize with the motives to go out and do something about it. Look, we have to give the legal system the chance to do it. And if the legal system can handle it, let the legal system handle it. Penal Code Section 288.5, which I understand Mr. Goularte is charged with, is a very, very serious offense. He will be serving 85% of a prison sentence. It is prison mandatory. He will have lifetime registration. He could serve 16 years in prison just for the one count. If they find
I read that that the max on this count, he can only serve 8 years.
Oh, golly.
Which to me,
then he's charged with one count. It would be like a one count of touching.
Rather than hundreds of counts of.
Okay, so then I would let them, if this is the case, then we're obviously at the very initial parts of investigating this daycare center and this dude. If it's one count of one act, which is what they've charged, they only charged one act?
I don't know. I read was 8 years.
If it's one touching, it's a violation of 288A or B, which is either forceful or non-forceful.
Well, then most likely the news reporting wasn't very good. They're not necessarily legal reporters. So,
this is true. And if there were more children involved, or if there was a continuous series of acts, then it should be charged under 288.5.
Multiple counts, yeah.
Right. And if there are more than one victim with a 288.5, now we're stacking up mandatory consecutive 16-year possible, 16-year possible, 16 for every victim to whom he did this. But he is still charged. The alleged molester is still pending felony charges, at least for one touching of this child. As I understand it, it wasn't the kind of molest, let me try and put this as delicately as I can, it wasn't the kind of molest that would have left physical evidence. There was, let me put it this way, no penetration and no likelihood that we'd find physical evidence. There was exposure and touching. And it's mere exposure and mere touching. We're not likely to find physical evidence. We can find all kinds of circumstantial evidence that may do this. But remember, the prosecution has got to prove their case beyond a reasonable doubt. And that's one of the protections why the government should handle this. My assessment, let's go back to my hypothetical. My wife tells me she was raped. My assessment of the evidence is not necessarily an objective one. We're not going to get all the evidence yet. I don't know what the defense is. Mr. Goularte, take this case. What if he says he has a perfect alibi? No, I was in a different state all day that day. The kid insists that I was being molested. We don't know what his defense is going to be, nor did Mr. Velasquez. What Mr. Velasquez had was a report that he sincerely believed in from his 4-year-old, from what I gather.
And it was both, so it was both Cain and his wife, Michelle, who noticed, so allegedly the abuse happened from, I believe, November 2021 to January 2022. So between these 3 months, right? And they noticed a drastic change in his behavior. It was within those 3 months, which caused them to, talk to him about it. And then from whatever he said, that was when they reported it to the police. And I do understand that, you have to have somebody very skilled in interviewing. But to me, just that is significant that the behavior changed. He's not coming home and telling stories.
Powerful evidence in child molest cases. Some of the most powerful evidence is a sudden change in a small child's behavior. They'll become quiet. Their mood will change. They're not going to be as happy. They're not going to be as expressive. Because these monster child molesters, what they'll do is they will first groom the child, preparing them for it. And then when they've done it, they will threaten. Some of the worst psychological damage you do is when you threaten the child, you don't tell anyone. We're going to keep this secret. And so you make it all the worse psychologically for the child. So you're causing some real psychological damage, and you can really see the change in behavior. And that is actually very powerful evidence that might corroborate the case. Again, we want to hear all the evidence.
They say that he admitted. They say that Goularte admitted that he was just helping the children pull their pants down in the bathroom. And to me, what's a 43-year-old man who doesn't even technically work at that daycare facility? He runs a concrete company out of it and helps out his mom from time to time. What is he doing, taking children into the bathroom and helping them pull their pants down? No. I'm sorry. And that is
right. My initial no way, that stinks to high heaven.
That also goes toward in June of 2022, on behalf of Cain Jr., Michelle Velasquez, the wife, filed a civil suit against Harry Goularte, the daycare center, the stepdad, the concrete company that's run out of there, for $30 million. Because
judge? Can a suit be leveled against this judge?
No. That I can promise you. The judge has immunity from the lawsuit, as do prosecutors and cops, frankly, if they're operating within the law. If the cop had probable cause, he's immune, even if it turns out the person was innocent. If the prosecutor had a reasonable basis to file the charges, he's immune, whatever the guilt or innocence.
I'm still stuck on a man spending several months in jail and having a huge bail amount set on him when he probably had no priors either. He has a history of a 2-time world champion fighter, a pillar of his community, helps children. Runs gyms, helps people all the time. Probably much more conspicuously productive member of the community than this other jack.
Well, look at the facts here, Mark. This guy targeted these people for whom one person, the criminal charges are still pending and a civil lawsuit is still pending. Now, know the difference between a civil lawsuit. If this person, let's say the alleged molester's mom had been a knowing participant, she could be charged criminally. She was not yet charged criminally. So I don't know what the facts are, and I don't want to speculate as to what the facts are. And a civil suit has a much lower standard of proof. You're just suing for money damages, and you can get your damages simply by saying she knew or should have known She didn't supervise adequately and didn't know what she could have and should have known. And you can get civil, ka-ching. So that is a different standard of proof. And she has not been criminally charged. And, it's not just the people in the car. It's anyone around the car.
Everybody else.
Everybody else whose life was endangered by Mr. Velasquez. But more
I could
than
understand it if Cain just went and beat the shit out of him, which is what he should have done, honestly. I mean, he
could have done, right?
But then again, I mean, somebody was
Can you imagine that? Cain Velasquez coming up to you to whoop your ass? That would be one of the most frightening things, I think.
See, that might be the use of deadly force. One of us using a gun may be the equivalent of
some people are kind of joking, saying, well, the reason why he chose a gun is because he would have been definitely charged for attempted murder because his hands are deadly weapons.
The gun is
lethal force. Yeah, no, he's an all-around threat. But what I get, so what if you're just like an innocent bystander driving at the same time and you get shot by Cain? Right? You did nothing about it. It was reckless. It was very.
He was threatening the lives of everyone around.
Yeah.
Was he sure of who all was in the car? And he didn't hit the molester. He hit someone else. He could have killed this person who did not molest his child. And so that is totally unreasonable. Velasquez, in my view, this is a no-brainer. He's guilty of a crime. We cannot permit this, even if he is right about his son having been molested. This is a clear case of a crime. And to go through some of the things you guys discussed, Jax, you and Paul discussed last week, I don't think that there's an insanity defense here available, not as I understand the insanity law in California. He had a perfectly understandable motive. He didn't shoot at this guy because he thought he was, part of a Martian invasion, or because he was possessed by Satan. He shot him for the whole reason why we're discussing this is that it's a perfectly understandable motive, a sane motive. And he didn't use a banana, he used a gun. And, I need that kind of detachment from reality to show that this guy's really not guilty by reason of insanity. And even were he found not guilty by reason of insanity, let's say the jury sympathizes with his position and says, yeah, he was temporarily insane, whereas I can't myself legally see the insanity here. He seemed to be in touch with it. And aware of the moral character of his action is also part of the test. And he was acting in what he thought was a morally righteous way, but he was targeting these people. That is why I think we had the no bail. If I let this guy out on something less, no bail at all, is he going to go back out and target these people? Right. Is he going to go chase them down yet again? And so the circumstance, another thing you discussed was, and something Mark Garagos, he's got, of course, Velasquez has got the famous Mark Garagos, his defense attorney, who says that there could be a...
What's famous about Mark Garagos? I'm not familiar with him.
Didn't he do the civil case? Didn't he do the civil case for Simpson?
And many other famous cases.
He got Simpson prosecuted in the civil case.
Yeah, and you got Mark Garagos is a celeb attorney, and the way he's going to approach this is the idea of provocation, heat of passion. In a murder or an attempted murder case, and the classic example of this is a man comes home and finds his wife in bed with someone else. He sees it right there in front of him. He kills them. He takes out his gun and shoots one of them or both of them. That is an intentional homicide. But we say he was so provoked that a person of ordinary prudence would be similarly provoked. And if he's acting in the immediate provocation of that heat of passion, is what we call it, then what it does is it reduces a murder to a voluntary manslaughter. In this case, all it would have the effect of doing would be to reduce the attempted murder charge or charges to attempted voluntary manslaughter, because it's still an intentional attempt to kill someone. And the intent here is a no-brainer. He shot up the car. He shot up a car that he thought contained the molester of his kid. So he intended to kill the guy. So the question is here, was he so provoked that it's just a attempted voluntary manslaughter?
Yeah,
which is the effect of that would be.
Unfortunately, I read Inside the Criminal Mind by Stanton Samanow and the 10 Myths Great
Yeah.
book. One of the myths he busts is the crime of passion. And there's something in me that finds it myself. I get it, but it's just hard for me to wrap my mind around that. Let me just say, we're all on the side of due process. I think we all say this kind of violence was it was a reckless thing for him to do. It was a terrible thing to do, and he's likely to be prosecuted for it, and that would be rightfully so. We delegate violence to the government so that it could be subjected to rules, right? So rules like reason and evidence, do what we call due process to avoid this kind of stuff. Now, that said, we are in a weird world today. We are in a world that seems to be upside down, and the justice system doesn't seem to be working for innocent people. If anything, it seems to be bent on being advocates for the bad guy. Now, in a world like that, where the justice system is betraying people left and right, legalizing theft, letting people, letting armed robbers and people who are attempting murder off without any bail, the no bail scenarios that are rampant in states like California, I think, in states like in New York, where these guys just say, "Hey, I'm going to be out in the street in 5 minutes. Who cares what you do to me?" Doesn't this inspire the kind of sense that I can no longer delegate force to the government? I have to be looking out for, number one, for myself, and I have to make sure that these people are away off the streets and out of my face, and I have to do it by force.
That, boy, you put your finger right on it, and as the government lets us down more and more, as it becomes no longer the agent for justice, but an agent of injustice, at what point do we say, that's it? I'm rebelling against this government. It's 1776 time. You're principally become a rights violator, not a rights protector. And so I'm now rejecting the state, and I'm acting, in effect, in a world of anarchy where I have to get my justice. If we're short of that, it seems to me that we simply have to swallow hard, even when the legal system is doing unjust things. I'd ask the hypothetical question, would it be okay? Now, as a fact, O.J. Simpson killed his former wife, Nicole Brown Simpson. That's a fact. I'm certain of that. Would it be okay for a member of the Brown family to kill O.J. Simpson now?
No.
I think that we'd have to say that if you wanted to do that, if you say, look, the justice system has failed me, and therefore I have to get my own justice here. Okay. If you have a degree of certain, and think about this too, in court, we have to prove things beyond a reasonable doubt to a unanimous jury. In other words, you have to have rational certainty in the matter.
That's for criminal, right? But civil is another level.
That's why we don't let Velasquez do this. He doesn't know beyond a reasonable doubt. He has in his head a report, an after the fact report. He doesn't have all the evidence the cops have, much less know the defense. So while the case is pending against the molester, he is absolutely, in my view, it's not even the O.J. Simpson case yet. He doesn't even have the justification, say, that the Brown family would have in killing O.J. because the criminal case is still pending.
James, I gotta say this now because, okay, now the Brown family did exactly the right thing, right? They took a civil lawsuit out and they sued the guy for millions upon millions of dollars, which he avoided by moving to Florida.
Right. You're not going to get that.
They don't get a cent of it, and I think the father's already passed away, so he's never seen justice for his son. But even though I am morally behind this idea that you got to abide by the verdict is what it is. In that court, it was proven beyond a reasonable doubt that O.J. Simpson murdered those two innocent human beings. There was a jury that was making a stand against past criminal justice abuses against the Black community, and they did not refer to the evidence at all. And the defense was completely fallacious. It was all a lie. Now, in those circumstances, this is just a total hypothetical, and I know the answer myself, but I just want to see. I mean, I think we can all understand it. Where the proof was there. There were 500 pieces of proof against O.J. Simpson. You don't get any better than that as far as proof goes. The guy was definitively guilty of murdering two human beings.
Now, I'm certain of that because I saw the trial.
And
Yes, I
that's
saw the
when I
trial,
would like,
and I read the follow-ups to the trial, and it's like
Right.
I remember somebody saying to Goldman, the father, well, there wasn't any, there wasn't any blood. Don't you need blood evidence? He's like, what? I mean, how much more blood evidence do you
How much
need?
more blood evidence do
There was
you
blood at the
need?
scene. There was blood in his car.
Right.
There was blood at his residence. There was blood all over the place. I
Right.
mean,
Now, I brought up that example for a couple of reasons. Back in the 1990s, we didn't have this revolving door like we do in New York City on bail cases. We didn't have these like the LA prosecutor who's deciding not to prosecute laws that he's, required under the California Penal Code to prosecute. So we're living in a worse system now. There's no doubt about it. But even then, it would seem to me you have to wait for the legal system to happen. And if it happens, if you do go out, say a dad does go out and shoot O.J. Simpson, he has to be willing to take the murder charge himself.
yes.
I would say in a
simple.
situation, yes, I agree. I would say in a
Get on his
situation
side.
like that, where it was clear, very clear, beyond a reasonable doubt that OJ did it, and then he gets off, I would, pull the dad aside and be like, maybe just do it very discreetly, cover your tracks. If you get caught, it's on you.
The point,
It was a
the
very
point,
famous-
the
It was a
point
very
is,
famous thing.
the point is I'm sorry. The point
Go
is you understand it to some moral degree, but the still, if we're going to keep a civilized society, we can't allow that kind of vengeful cycle to become the habit as opposed to due process. Even though the wrong case was lost, you can't take the law into your own hands. That's
vigilantes
So we
aren't
have
waiting. Our vigilantes aren't waiting for proof beyond a reasonable doubt. When I was a prosecutor, there was a very famous case of a guy who got off on a continuous child molest case for a purely technical reason. It was a totally legally technical reason that he got off, some speedy trial thing or something. The guy's coming out of court. Father of the victim was wearing trench coat. And this is all caught on cameras, mind you. The defendant is coming out of court. The guy pulls open the trench coat, gets his long gun out, bam, kills the molester right there in the lobby of the courthouse. Dude is charged with murder. Jury lets him off. Now, that is where Velasquez has his best bet in the legal system, is a kind of jury nullification. Whatever I say about the insanity defense, or whatever I say about these are the technical rules, right?
Yeah.
The jury might just say, I don't care what the prosecutor says the requirements of an insanity defense are. I'm finding him not guilty by reason of insanity. Now, mind you, if that were to happen, you don't go free. You get put in a psychiatric hospital. You get put in a psychiatric hospital until the shrink say that you're safe, and they can hold you there for as long as the sentence would have been.
I actually think that
involuntarily committed. I thought this was no longer a thing.
What was no longer?
No, you can be involuntarily committed. For example, if you do something like Cain Velasquez does, he's let off by jury nullification, but he's not let off. He has to go to a psychiatric hospital to be evaluated, and he could be there potentially as long as the sentence.
Because he's still considered to be a danger to society if he's having such breaks with reality. Who's to say that he's not going to get out and do the same thing again?
An insanity defense consists of admitting that I did it.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, I absolutely committed that crime. And yep, it would look like I intentionally did that crime. I'm saying that I did the crime, and the defense has the burden of proving, this is rare in the criminal law, the defense has the burden of proving insanity, that he was so out of touch that, and if you've done something like you've killed someone, and there's no doubt you've killed someone because of your insanity, they're not just going to let you out because they say not guilty by reason of insanity. People have a confused idea of what the results of a not guilty by reason of insanity means. They also, in terms of provocation and heat of passion, don't realize it just reduces the crime. It doesn't make the crime go away.
So along those lines, we have just a couple super chat. One from Rob Flitton for $20 just as a support. Thank you, Rob. Another one from Allie, kind of relevant to this, and it was in regards to the question that you posed earlier, James. Can you really compare driving down the street on the same level as catching your wife cheating in bed? And my response to this is, I think it depends on how you catch them. I think it depends on how you learn of the situation. If somebody called up Cain and said, "Hey, dude, I just saw what's his name out on bail," And I thought he wasn't, I just saw Goularte out on bail, and Cain waits 48 hours before he, gets his gun, loads his gun, conceals it in his car, stalks them for 2 days to figure out where they're going to be, and then purposely, chases them down. That I don't think would be a heat of passion. It would have to be something where
the law is very clear on
instantly
this.
Faced with it, and he already had the gun in the car or whatever, because maybe
it has to be acting under the near immediate discovery. And it has to be an overwhelming kind of discovery that would throw the ordinary person out of balance. But as I say, that would only reduce it. So even just to get that heat of passion reduction, he couldn't have had a cooling off period, a period of days, even the period in which he's chasing in the car. The more time that passes between the discovery and the event, the less likely you are to get the heat of passion. And in fact, if there's any clear separation, any real cooling off period, the judge will tell the jury that ain't heat of passion.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
So the circumstances that we don't know here, the circumstances of how dad discovered, how soon it was, and I'm not clear about this, how the dad discovered, how soon it was to when he did this, was it in the, chase by itself is a borderline case, it seems to me. If you had just seen someone shoot your wife and get into a car and run away, and you're chasing him down right that immediate moment, that might be a kind of heat of passion moment. If you were told 2 days ago, and now you're planning, where's he going to be 2 days from now? Ooh, that ain't heat of passion. You've had plenty of time to think and cool down.
I feel like all of us have some empathy for where Cain is coming from. I think we would all feel the exact same feelings that he felt, and maybe even want to act on many of the impulses that he did, but would not.
You see,
for a knowledge of
sympathizing with and understanding someone's motive is not the same as a legal or moral justification for doing it.
Right.
We have to distinguish those in our minds clearly. And the good distinction you guys were really focused on is the legal moral here. There can be circumstances in my mind which would make it on an individual moral basis perfectly okay because the legal system has utterly failed you, let's say. And you're perfectly willing to take, it's like civil disobedience. There are times when civil disobedience might be justifiable, but if you do that, you have to be willing to take the consequences. I am standing outside my government. I am saying they did something unjust, but I'm willing to take whatever the consequences. And frankly, if my kid were molested or someone I loved was murdered, I might be perfectly willing to pay that price.
I've thought about this, what would I have done? I have empathy for Cain. I have much love and respect for him. I think about, if this happened to my own child, what would I have done? And I think the thing that would have stopped me from getting in my car and chasing them down or just shooting them in general, the thing that would have stopped me would have been, okay, I'm clearly going to go to jail for this. I know I'm clearly going to go to jail. What does that mean? I can't be there for my daughter now. Now my daughter has to go.
Can I be there for my kid now? And isn't it more important that I'm not in jail and with my kid? That would be the overriding concern.
I mean, sadly, the person who I feel the most empathy for here is Cain Jr., who lost his father for 8 months while and had
period for him too.
Yeah.
He's just revealed, if he's really a molest victim, and if he'd just gone through this, and now daddy's gone for the next 8 months, devastating to that family.
I will say
for that kid.
For what it's worth, my opinion is worth nothing in the legal world. But I read the civil case on this. I don't know if you read the civil case.
I did. Thank you for sharing it with me yesterday.
I read the civil case on this. And then I also read the when you go in and you look up all the case and you look at all the hearings and you look at all the events that happened, they were trying to serve Harry Goularte, his concrete company, Paul Bender, who's the stepfather, and Patty, I can't remember, or Patty Goularte, I guess. They were trying to serve them personal service for the civil suits, because you have to give them, you have to personally serve them, and then the person has to swear that they served them and blah, blah, blah. Kind of like on the movies, Mr. So-and-so, you've been served, right? That's sort of consistent. They were trying to serve them multiple times. They evaded service. and they had to take out ads in the local paper of, by the way, you're being sued for $30 million. If you don't come to court on this date for this hearing, we can rule in your absence. And that, to me, I know that, we're not supposed to take that as a sign of guilt or innocence, but I'm sorry. They tried serving them multiple times. They kept evading it. Why? They all have, I think that they all have some level of complicity and guilt. And what's really interesting about this is that they could rule that Goularte is not guilty in criminal court, but they could still rule that he is guilty in civil court because the standards of evidence are different. Am I correct on that?
Absolutely correct.
Yep.
And the Goulartes have asked for a delay in the civil case until the criminal case is decided, because having a higher standard of proof than a civil case, if you prove the molest case, that will help the plaintiff. He doesn't now have to prove that the molest happened. He doesn't have to prove that aspect. It's been proved by a higher standard. So frequently they'll wait. This time it's the defense saying that even though these others weren't charged and are being sued, they can be compelled to testify, even though they have a Fifth Amendment right in a civil case, whereas in a criminal case, they wouldn't be. So we can't let them be compelled to testify in the civil case, which would then give them a record of talking. So it does, to some extent, and here, getting to your point, their evasion of service and their desire to delay the civil case seems to show that it could be interpreted as consciousness of guilt. The law is very clear. Standing on your Fifth Amendment rights, not talking, even evading service is not proof of guilt. Now,
Right.
I tend to agree with you, though. As a matter of common sense, they at least believe, but it's only civil liability, which means known or should have known. So all that they really have to prove in the civil case, Velasquez in his civil case, is that mom should have supervised better, should have and could have known, but didn't. Would that justify shooting her or shooting her husband? See, Mr. Velasquez went way beyond anything morally justifiable, even if everything he believes about his kid happened was true. That doesn't give you the right to possibly kill both of these people who may only have some civil negligence liability.
And stray bullets, innocent, completely innocent bystanders, right?
Right.
How would he have felt if one of those bullets, hit another child and killed that child?
Exactly. Kill some innocent child because your child was, touched.
Right. So bottom line is he should have just beat the shit out of him.
And it really would have been very, very hard to get I can tell you, as an 18-year prosecutor, it would have been really hard to get a jury to convict him if he just beat up someone he really had good reason to believe molested his 4-year-old child.
No, because he could say, hey, I was in control the whole time. I know exactly how far to take it because I'm a professional.
He didn't have to lay a hand on him. He could have also just put the fear of God into him, and that
fear of God into him. Exactly.
That could have sufficed. Look, this also shows the value of philosophy in our lives, because we're looking at the long term all the time when we're in the middle of something, even a high stress situation like that. Unfortunately, a guy like Cain, he trains to act off of his impulse and intuitions instantly and in a violent, very violent way. So his profession promotes the violent action and promotes expressing yourself violently against other people. So it's probably much harder for him to rein in those horses than. And
in this case, he wasn't being selfish enough. Right. If he was
because
being
a truly long-term look at it he would have understood that he's taking him away from his son at a time when his son needs him more than any other time in his life.
Exactly.
Yes, selfishness is good, folks. What Cain Velasquez did is very unselfish. Hey, there's someone free trade with Swedish kroners, 100 Swedish kroners. Thank you, free trade. The only situation in which you can take the law into your own hands is if the legal system is failing systematically, not in exceptional cases. The justice system can't be perfect. Thoughts? Hey, well, wait a minute. I think it is failing systematically in a lot of places. We're not talking about piecemeal injustices here and there. We're talking about real systemic issues that are being promoted by governors and states attorneys generals right now that I think are very harmful. What do you think, James?
Well, I think that a matter of personal morality, if I'm absolutely certain that some horrific injustice was done against me, and if I'm willing to take the full-on punishment for the consequences of this, the state screwed up. I didn't screw up, but I'm willing to go to jail for it. Then yeah, that changes though. See, I used the analogy before, like walking on a dome. You know, like Half Dome in Yosemite. You're on the top of this dome, and it curves, and it slightly curves, and slightly curves, and slightly curves, and at some point you're going to fall off, and it's no longer safe. So how far do you walk out along the edge? We're currently on the edge. Let me use that analogy with our legal system. We're getting closer and closer and closer to a system that is basically injustice as opposed to justice. But so long as we're on this side of the curve, where it in effect is mostly justice or fundamentally just, but is causing individual injustices, then I would have to say that, yeah, you have to submit to the system, right? Unless you are willing to submit also to the system's consequences on you.
Unless you're
The
Tyree
problem-
Nichols and
Yeah, but
you
the
know,
problem
you got to
is-
run away from the system.
But the problem is you inch up to that edge and it comes upon you before you know it, right?
Before you know it.
It's there, and then it may be too late. Well, folks, tomorrow is the 700th daily objective. Folks,
Wow.
700 of these things. That's tomorrow. Please join us for the 700th daily objective. Tomorrow's Thursday, right? So it's the Thursday Collective. Are you guys going to be
Is.
there?
I wish I could be there, but I'll be on a plane to New York. So
Well, James, are you going to be
if
there?
if I have Wi-Fi on the plane, then I'll chat in snarky comments.
I'll
Love
check
it.
in with the powers that be. I'm not sure if I can be, but let me see.
We're
I
gonna
will
have
if I can.
We're gonna have some kind of day. We're gonna have some kind of daily collective. Not sure what it's going to be about, but it's going to be the 700th one. So please tune in. And Life on Earth at 10 p.m. tomorrow as well. Guys, this has been a very stimulating discussion. Did we touch all the points that we needed to touch? Did we leave anything out that is particularly important for this?
No, I just want to say that my own look at the evidence so far gives me a strong suspicion that Cain Jr. was in fact continuously molested. And on the other hand, based on the evidence I have now, I'm certain that Cain Sr., Mr. Velasquez, has done something that's criminally wrong and should be prosecuted, and even morally wrong given the facts. On the other hand, even in that context, I can have a great deal of sympathy and understanding for Mr. Velasquez doing this. I think anyone who's been a parent or a teacher, loves a small child, can understand the motive behind this. If he was certain that his child had been repeatedly molested by this guy, who can't sympathize? On the other hand, the law cannot permit someone to just go up and shoot up a car, chase down and then shoot up a car filled with people because you believe that your child was the victim of a crime. The law doesn't allow that to happen.
My hope is that there is a degree of leniency in I think that there's no possibility for a not guilty verdict. And I don't even know if that's what they're thinking. My hope is that there will be a degree of leniency and time served with probation.
He does get credit for those 8 months, by the way, against whatever sentence he gets.
Exactly. So. Yeah, I got those 8 months in the bank. So,
right. I got 8 months done.
Yeah. So, because I mean, the best place for him to be, he's not a danger to society. The best place for him to be is at home with his family, continuing to help people at the gym. And, I hope that he's allowed to continue to do that, because this is a man that does not deserve, in my opinion, to be in jail any more than he already has.
No one died. While he used a gun, and it's very serious.
Lucked out.
It's a first offense. No one died. And if this is a credible report to him, then there is a huge mitigating factor that should be taken into account. I certainly agree with that.
What do you want to see happen, Mark?
Well, same thing. If the guy's guilty of molesting this child, he's got to go away for as long as possible. Cain committed a crime. My hope as well is that, he'll probably be prosecuted for it and hopefully get time served in probation, because there is a massive mitigating, I think, circumstance behind why he did what he did.
Probably get a prison sentence. Use a gun, go to prison is still the law. Now in LA, they don't file that allegation anymore. But since he used the gun personally in a commission of a felony, the law would say he got to go to prison, at least for some period of time. But if he gets the minimum on it, it could be in effect time served. So.
Well, who knows? California is a wacky place. It's the land
And
of
getting wackier every day.
anything possible. And I just got a little wacky announcement here. Actually, it will be the 699th daily objective because there wasn't
One short.
yesterday. So we're one short, but hey, what the heck? They'll come out, visit us. We have stimulating conversations.
You're one beer short of a six pack.
One beer short, but it'll be a stimulating conversation, no doubt. From an objectivist point of view, we need more of these discussions out there in the world. So come and participate, guys. It's been great as usual. Good to see you guys. I hope you have a tremendous week. Hopefully, I'll see you tomorrow. If not, then I'll see you again some other time. James, Jax, peace.
Peace.
Bye, everybody.